Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with some more SFO Grimhammer. The new patch, Art of War, drops this Friday the 29th, and there's a few things to cover in terms of what's changed for each faction. As always, keep in mind that this patch, the Art of War, focuses around battle changes in both custom and campaign, with anything relating to actual campaign mechanics likely coming in a future patch. In the first video of today, we're going to be focusing around the Ogre Kingdoms. You see, Venris doesn't hate them. Admittedly, the Ogre Kingdoms are in a very good place right now as they were a DLC faction, and those tend to be a bit better than the base games. But a few changes have come into effect to balance them with every other faction, as, well, everyone's getting some changes. So let's not waste any more time and jump right in. Naldor units have had their entities changed from 160 to 200. This is if the intention is to make them be used like Skaven slaves, they might as well have the numbers of them. The Naldor standard units, this is the one with the spears, have also had a little bit of an increase with anti-large damage, so that actually is quite helpful, especially if you're starting in the Mountains of Morn, where the grand majority of things that you're going to be fighting are going to be other ogres at the very beginning. Battle kitties, Saber Tusks, have had their unit increase from 32 to 48. Now, they also have access to the bleed contact effect, which will make them do more damage as soon as they get into the fray. Generally, this works out like your Saber Tusks are just now roided up versions of, say, Warhounds. They'll do a lot more damage, that's for sure, especially with the multiple entities, but also keep in mind that anything that does get more entities will be more susceptible to damage. Ogre Maneaters have had a few different changes. So first up, entities have been upped from 16 to 20, and like I said before, you'll be able to do more damage due to having more entities to actually, do the animations, but you will be more susceptible to damage. In an effort to combat this, they've also received a plus 10 physical resistance buff to all variants. This means that, yes, you will take more damage, but not as much as you think. The normal Maneater has been given faster attacks and a higher melee attack percentage just to keep them more viable throughout your campaign. While they're not the best one out of all the options, now you have more reason to at least bring them in. Maneaters with great weapons will now have the Bone Crusher contact effect. This reduces enemy speed and melee defense, making it a very effective debuffer, and you're going to need this, especially when you're dealing with other ogres. You're going to want to reduce their speed, or else you don't want to be on the receiving end of a charge, especially if you're bogged down in combat. Maneaters with Iron Fist, and this will be relevant with Iron Fist as a whole, now have scaling damage, meaning that they'll do 25% more damage as long as their health remains high. The lower their health, the lower damage they'll do, but it brings more of an element of the Iron Fist, which is supposed to act like a shield. This is how it also works on the tabletop, being a bit more like a secondary weapon too. Ogre Balls, all variants have also had some changes. As you can see, their unit entities have been upgraded from 24 to 30, once again as explained with the Maneaters, and also have a plus 10 increased physical resistance. With the normal standard Ogre Ball also having faster attacks and higher melee attack to make it more viable throughout your campaign, especially very early on. Iron Guts have had their entities changed from 16 to 20, and now also have access to plus 10 physical resistance too. They've also got increased missile resistance, high knockback resistance, and their speed has been lowered a little bit. Iron Guts will also have access to bolstered armor, an area of effect which increases physical resistance and armor. This makes them a bit more viable too, as now you've got a very heavily armored buffer unit, which could help you out, especially as you start dealing with more demons, and well, should you decide to pay the Cathayans a visit, it might help you a little bit more. Giants have been renamed to Slave Giants, which is their original lore-friendly name, and they've also received all the benefits that all other giant variants from SFO 2 have received, so they should be a bit more viable. It still depends on whether you like them or not. Personally, I've not used them too much, but they are a bit stronger and they are a bit more worth it. I just generally am not a very big fan of giants. Leadlchers have had their unit entities changed from 16 to 20 and also increased physical resistance. The more unit entities means that the more shots are getting fired, which means that your Leadlchers will be, well, more terrifying than they already are, having those 8th edition PTSD flashbacks at the moment. Always fun. Gorges now have some more unit entities, up from 16 to 20, so they're going to be able to be a bit more viable again. So if you've been holding off to play Scrog, well, this might be a good time to get back into it. Crushers, the Rhinox riders, have had a few changes too. So their unit entities have been increased from 12 to 15, their physical resistance plus 10 as usual, but also some increased missile resistance too, because if you're going to be riding on a Rhinox, well, you're going to be a bit more resistant to gunfire. Mass in general for the Rhinoxes has been increased, but their movement speed has been lowered a little bit, which makes sense. And finally, the Iron Fist variant also benefits from the scaling damage as before. Mournfang Cavalry have had a few changes too. The number of entities have been increased from 12 to 15, plus 10 physical resistance once again. The normal variant has faster attacks and higher melee attacks, so once again a bit more viable. And the Iron Fist variant has increased scaling damage. All in all, your Mournfang remain as your fastest cav, so nothing really changes in terms of playstyle, just a bit more increased damage output. Stonehorn have had a few nice buffs, increasing their missile resistance from 35% to 50% because, well, they're made out of stone, so you know. The ranged version also has the stagger shot contact effect, so their missiles will be a lot better, and both melee and ranged version have access to the grave wound contact effect for melee attacks. This makes them a lot stronger when it comes into putting them into the front line. So in general, they're just a bit stronger now, and yeah, I'm all for it. I'm a big fan of Stonehorns. Norblar scrap launchers have also received a quite nice buff in all honesty. Plus 10 physical resistance and missile resistance has been added, and the number of projectiles has been changed from 3 to 4. They'll definitely be a bit more durable, and they'll be better at hitting targets. This is a great thing, as the scrap launcher, in my experience through vanilla, I just haven't really seen too much of a use to use them. Maybe once we start dealing with bigger squads like, you know, Skaven and all that, yes, but right now, at least it's going to be doing a bit more damage. The Iron Blaster stays more or less the same as intended, as, well, it's a pretty good unit all around. It does have some general stat buffs, and of course plus 10 physical resistance and missile resistance to just make it a little bit better, but overall, it's a near perfect unit anyway. Spells have received a few changes, and you can see them as I scroll through them. If you want, you can stop. Well, by that I mean just pause as you wish. But generally, it's just to follow the same baseline that everything has had some changes. So increase cooldowns to not make everyone so magical reliant and focus more on the bigger battles. So through my testing, Ogres feel pretty much the same, and that's a good thing because, yeah, they take a bit more damage, but they're able to deal a bit more damage too. And you're only really going to notice the big damage output if you're dealing against stuff which is anti-large. And here I've got an example. I've got a randomly generated army for the Ogres and a randomly generated army for Khorne. I'm going to let it play off, but I'm going to say that the Ogres feel great. The Ogres still feel good, and everything just feels like Ogres. The missile resistant buffs overall are quite good, especially if you're going to be dealing against Cafe early on, and yeah, Ogres feel good. But then again, this is to be expected that this is Venris' favorite faction. But with all that being said, I'm going to let the rest of the battle play out. You can see how they perform. It's more or less near the end, and have a good day. We'll be back soon with Cafe and Kislev.
Out, boys! Leadlchers! Rampage this way! This way! Mournfang Cavalry! Stop them! Leadlchers! When do we eat? Looking for me? Leadlchers! Hungry! This way! Killing time! Leadlchers! Me! Call the meat! Scuba! Leadlchers! Thundering forth! Run for it! Take it all! Noblars! Noblars attack! Bring us meat!